Auditions. Let's hear it for Robert Tiffany. A quick note that this may be on KRCC, so I want all the storytellers to know that once you tell these stories, they belong to the world.
How do you follow a story like that? You know what it means when a preacher takes off his watch and sets it on the lectern before he starts a sermon? Nothing. My story is called Annie on Ice, or what you will. But before I go into that part of it, I'd kind of like to preface it. By about 18 years, back when I was going to SUNY Albany, I was a physics major. I was going to go into nuclear physics research. I was home for spring break. I had just had my 20th birthday, and I was sitting on the can, pondering what I was going to do with my life. And I can't help wondering how many life-changing decisions that we've made sitting on the can. It's a great place to ponder your life. But anyway, there I was, thinking, okay, Robert, well, Bruce back down, my first name, my middle name actually. You're 20 years old, and there's only one thing you've really loved doing up to now, and that's acting. I loved being on stage. I said, I don't know that I can go on in the direction I was going and not see how far I could go as an actor. So this really got to me. So a few days later, that following Sunday, I was on my way back to school, taking a friend of mine to Bard and her cousin. And about halfway to Bard, somebody said, hey, let's go to New York for a few days. Now, I had to be at school the next day, and I was in a production of Hamlet. That rehearsal that following night, but I said, hey, why not? Let's go. I'm all for it. So we dropped my friend off because she had an exam the next day, so she had to be back to school, and she joined us, I think, a day later. And the cousin and I tooled down to New York and knocked on her aunt's apartment at about 11 o'clock at night, and said, here we are. And we were in the city for a few days. And it was, while I was there, on a kind of a lazy, rainy afternoon in Central Park. I was sitting on a rock in Central Park in this misty rain when I decided, yeah, I've got to do this. I've got to drop out of physics and see what I can do as an actor. So I did. I dropped all my courses except the one acting course I was taking at the time. Kind of a neat course. It was taught by Robert Lewis, who was a New York director. He directed the original Broadway production of Brigadoon, among others, so he was kind of neat to have a class with it. But I dropped all my other classes, and then at the end of that semester I dropped out because I decided a degree from SUNY Albany in drama was going to be what the paper was printed on as far as getting an acting job, and slowly came up. So 18 years later, my acting career finally culminated in an Equity National tour of Annie. I have been in New York for the weekend, and said, well, let's see what auditions are there. So I looked it up, and okay, they were having this auditions for a production of Annie being done up in Rochester. So I said, yeah, let's go for it. Originally got cast as FDR, but then they called me back a day later and said, well, the guy who we wanted for Warbucks can't do it, would you like to do Warbucks? I said, yeah. And, so I got cast as Warbucks in this production of Annie. Well, as it turned out, it was a backers performance play. We only did like three performances, but that were basically to get the money people up to see this thing, to see if they would back us to take us out on the road and do a national tour. But this was going to be a very different national tour. This was going to be Annie on Ice. This was 1986, so it had been done a a lot over the last previous 10 years, and everybody did it. Okay? Nobody had done Andy on ice. We were going to go into the hockey rinks, put down a floor. We had our stage set up on one end. It was really kind of a neat stage. They had these big, tall pyramid columns in the back. They would rotate so they could have like 3 backgrounds. And then the furniture and the lights and everything. They put the chairs down on the floor, and we would do Andy on ice. We figured, how many hockey fans come to see Andy? Well, this will celebrate. Maybe not. It didn't go real well. We got fairly small crowds, for the most part. And the problem is that because they couldn't sell tickets, they couldn't pay us to come in and do it. And I remember one particular thing, it might have been in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, or somewhere around there. There was a big problem because they didn't have upfront money when we got there to pay us, say, here, go on. And we said, well, you're not going to pay us, we're not going to go on. And they said, well, you've got to, because if you go on, we'll sell enough tickets, we can pay you. And they went back and forth like this for quite some time. We finally decided to go on, but it was so late when we made up our mind to go on, there wasn't time to put up any set, hardly any lights. We had set pieces, we had costumes and set pieces. We had a couple of T-stands with lights one on each side, with 3 or 4 lamps across, and we had 2 follow spots in the back that just followed you all the time. You know how difficult it is to see your other actors when you're being hit the face with a follow spot the whole time you're on stage? It was so weird. You were blind, absolutely blind. I mean, we'd done the show several times, so we kind of knew where everybody was, but you couldn't see anybody. But the weird thing about that, I think the audience must have picked up on how hard we were really trying to make this work. Because at the end, I swear, it was one of the best audience, best responses, best applause I've ever experienced. They loved us. They just loved us. And the applause went on forever, and we went, wow, this is neat. This was a great audience. And that's, I think, part of the wonderful thing about theater is that give and take you have with live actors on stage. And like I say, they must have sensed something, and they just gave us so much. And the audience got us through that performance that night. Okay, so we went on, and Andy on Ice wasn't doing really well. So our producer got on the phone and said, we have got to get this into some legitimate theaters. You know, a lot of people, and we got in some very good legitimate theaters. All over the kind of the north Midwest area. It was a bus and truck, which was kind of neat because we're going on a bus, right? Well, we got this big steamer trunk with the drawers and they're opening up and everything. I had everything up, all my stuff was in this wonderful steamer trunk. I just went in, we had a dolly, and I just latched the trunk to the dolly. I'd be the first one on the bus, so I'd stick it underneath, and the last one out so I could pull it back out. This was really great. Until the towns that we were getting booked in got so far apart that we couldn't go by bus anymore. I remember getting to an airport in Washington, D.C. I think we had just played George Washington University, or George Mason University. And now they said, well, it's really too far for the next one. We've got to fly you. So I said, I gotta buy some suitcases and get rid of this trunk. So I did, and sent the trunk back home and packed everything in suitcases. But before we did that, though, I'm going to back up just a little bit. One of the places that we bused to, we had a fairly long trip between here and there. But there was a town right in the middle called Lima, Ohio. Little small town, and they, bless their hearts, they got us booked one night in Lima, Ohio. Now, I don't know if you know, how many people here watch the show Glee? Yeah. That takes place in Lima, Ohio. So it was like, hey, I know that town. That's kind of neat. Actually, I think it was my birthday that night in Lima. And I have to confess, I had my first blowjob that night. It's not what you're thinking. It's a drink. It's a drink out of a cordial glass without using your hands. There's 2 dear ladies who had put the show together. I think they'd taken me out for dinner, and then they bought me this BJ after. So that was kind of neat. That's my memory of my moment. But we played Buffalo, New York, it was kind of neat. We were there. We were in each city for about a week. So in Buffalo, I got to go to the AAA minor league team there. I actually got to throw out the first pitch of the ball game. That was kind of neat. Almost did. There were actually 3 of us doing it, one of which was this little kid. And he threw it out, and he started to walk back in and said, "Wait a minute! I'm going to throw it! I'm going to throw the first pitch too." So they came back and let me throw a pitch. I actually got it to the catcher without bouncing it. So that was good. But I remember too, afterwards they took me back. We signed autographs everywhere. But they took me, after the game, they took me back and took me into the locker room and gave me a ball and a bat that had been broken and taped back together. They gave me that. I have no idea where that is today. Boston, neat city. But the thing I remember most about Boston was my dresser. Being an equity tour, a lead, I had my own dresser. I had my own dressing room. I had my own dresser, which was kind of neat. But in Boston, there was this really little, very old guy. And I'll tell you something, he was great. Everything was right where it was supposed to be. If I needed something, it reached out, it was in my hand. He was wonderful. Turns out he had been Yul Brynner's dresser in The King and I before it went to Broadway. Way back in the 50s. That's how long this guy had been. So, neat TV. Nice theaters, really nice theaters. Toronto, we played at the O'Keefe Center in Toronto. After the run, the last day I went up, and at the O'Keefe Center, they have this big, huge, tall, blank white wall, and they hang pictures of everybody who's performing there. And they had a picture of the gal who played Annie and me up on the wall. That was kind of neat. I don't know if it's still there or not. I never made it back to check and see if it was still up there, but that was kind of neat. So, great fun. Really, very special time in my life. We went from Toronto to Nashville, from Boston to Washington, just below Seattle. What's that town up there? Spokane, I think. Just all over the place. We never made Denver. Through Denver on the way home. We had to stop there, but never made it. But I can't help but, Joseph Campbell, I think, said it best. I don't know if you remember, they had a story or a series on PBS several years ago. And he always said, "Follow your bliss. And doors will open for you that you never knew were there." And I was so grateful to this day that I decided, as a very young man, before I ever heard of Joseph Campbell, to follow my bliss.